Basically, he said, we're not sure why, but your kidneys have shut down. After a round of dialysis, my coworker Jim Bex arranged for me to be transferred into Northwestern in downtown Chicago, and the doctors later would diagnose the condition as rhabdomyolysis, which produced, see if I get this right, acute tubular necrosis. A lot of fancy medical terms to say that because of the extreme physical exertion, too much protein, too much muscle breakdown occurred, and it put too much protein, which is what muscles are made out of, into the bloodstream. The protein clogged the tubes in my kidneys that are there to try to keep the blood clean. Essentially, the kidneys were overwhelmed and shut down as a result. They told me that they see these kinds of things in marathon runners and triathletes who push their body beyond the limits, or crush victims where too much impurities get in the bloodstream. Obviously, our first question was, is this permanent? And the doctors wouldn't say. They said that every person reacts differently and that at this point, it's just a waiting game to see if they'll turn on. I would go through 2 more rounds of dialysis, and after a week and a half, the kidneys, in fact, did turn back on, and I started passing the 25 pounds of fluid that I had retained. I would actually end up losing 32 pounds over the next week, not my recommended weight loss program, I assure you. And then after a subsequent biopsy, the doctors would come back and they would tell me that there was minimal permanent scarring and that I should anticipate having a normal life expectancy of my kidneys. It was like, whew, could this episode finally be over? A week later, 2 of my closest friends, John and Nancy Ortberg, came into town because John was speaking at our annual leadership summit in August. They stopped by for a long visit, and toward the end of our time, John, in his usual insightful way, challenged me to do 2 things. First, he said, you need to write down what happened as soon as possible before some of these details get a little fuzzy. Your family is going to want to have this to reflect back on in the future. I thought, oh, sounds good, I can do that. And second, he said, now that you know you're going to heal up fully, your physical body is probably going to recover quickly, more quickly than your soul may need for you to move on. He said, I know your job and environment at Willow, and you're going to jump right in, move 100 miles an hour, and perhaps not fully process what has happened. Maybe you and Davey need to live in it for a little bit more to see if there's something that God might want to tell you. And so that's what I've tried to do over these last few months. I don't know how long this era is going to last, but I am in no hurry to speed things up. And so with the remaining time, I want to let you in on some of what's been ricocheting in my soul lately. These are 3 disconnected themes that are only united by God's work in my soul since the incident. The first theme has to do with hope and how hope works in our lives. Let me take you back to Davey and I way out there in the ocean. After concluding that we were moments away from drowning, a million thoughts seemed to flash through my mind. To this day, it's hard for me to comprehend how many images race through my mind in such a short period of time. But I was doing some research on the brain about how God designed it to respond when life is hanging by a thread, when danger and fear are all consuming. They call it the fight or flight response. In just those precious moments, the body kicks into unknown territory. It's willing to take any reserves from anywhere to preserve life. It jettisons a rush of adrenaline into the bloodstream, screaming at the muscles to do more than the conscious brain thinks is possible. Emotions of defeat and acquiescence get run over by a resolve to fight for life. In those critical seconds, scientists say the brain becomes a virtual thunderstorm of electrical activity, processing multiple times of information per second than it normally does in normal circumstances. Time itself begins to slow down because so much is being processed by the brain. In fact, later on, my wife and I would disagree on how long the whole incident was. I was absolutely certain it was 30 to 45 minutes long. And she and the kids have assured me, Jimmy, it was well below 15 minutes. So there Davey and I were, about 50 yards out, tired, struggling, full of panic, and about to give up. Davey had just climbed on me, and we both went under. And when we came up, I remember looking at my wife and 2 daughters there on the shore, and I pictured them in a double funeral that they didn't even know they were about to go through. I knew it. But they didn't. They were so happy, and I didn't want... I pictured 2 caskets with our pictures beside them. I wondered how terrible the bodies would look if they even found them. We were about to die, and nobody knew it except me. I was angry, so angry. How could Davy and I lose our lives for such a throwaway experience? It was just a quick stop for a 15-minute dip in the waters of the Pacific Ocean. Our lives can't end like this. Certainly not Davy's. He's way too young. I want to see him and my daughters grow up. I want to be with Leanne. And I was angry at the situation, but I was even more angry at myself. How could I let my son get in this situation? Why didn't I act on my nervousness about the condition of the waves as we approached the shore? Why didn't I coach Davy about the dangers of the beach better? Why didn't I just cancel the whole deal and say, you know what, we'll go to the beach another time? I didn't consciously cry out to God to save us. I'm not sure why. It wasn't his fault. He didn't put us in this situation. I did. And truth is, in that moment, I didn't think God would save us if I asked. I wish I had the faith that God was going to miraculously save us, but I didn't. I was sad, and I had no hope. I wondered what it would be like to breathe in salt water into my lungs. Would it sting? Would it hurt? Would Davy's death be my last memory? Or would my death be his last memory? All those thoughts crossed my mind like a lightning bolt. And then my focus immediately went to Davy. I sternly looked at him and yelled, Davy, we cannot panic. No matter what happens, this is time we cannot panic. We cannot panic. I needed him to swim and not cling to me. He was too big. Over the last year and a half, he had grown about 6 inches. And I thought, maybe I could get back myself. But that wasn't going to happen. If anybody was going to make it back, it would be Davy. I was expendable, but not him. And what happened next saved our lives. Davy acted on my words. His panic immediately turned to resolve, and he started swimming again. And that, in the darkest moment of the nightmare, birthed a small glimmer of hope. But hope enough to try, to get going, to not give up. Truth is, I didn't have enough energy to save a victim, but I did have enough energy to help a contributor. And that's what Davy became. Now, I still didn't have enough hope that we would make it back fully, but I did have hope enough to try. And in any desperate situation, no matter how hopeless, that's all you need in the moment. Because here's what hope specializes in: seemingly hopeless situations. Its greatest potency comes when we're in the deepest of trouble, when it's the most elusive, when we don't see any way out. It's the last line of defense before we give up on something. But the beauty is, you don't need a ton of it. You just need a speck of it. Just a speck of it to get going in the general right direction. And most of us know the general right direction to move in our problems. It's just that we don't see or believe in the full outcome of the thing, and so we throw in the towel prematurely. I may not have believed that we could get back, but I generally knew which way to go. It's like Mexico was that way, Hawaii was that way, we're going to Mexico. Better odds. And here's the miraculous thing that happens. When you get going, more hope comes along the way at just the right time, in just the right amount for you to take another step.